small amount of knowledge on the subject, I think that makes sense. And that's consistent with traditional Chinese medicine. It's also consistent for those of us who drink coffee, like myself. You drink coffee for 5 days, you take 2 days off. That next day is the strongest cup of coffee you've had in a long time. You know, it's because
me and my friends who are just coming to the next podcast after this, we just got done doing Sober October. So no alcohol, no marijuana, no nothing. Well, we drank coffee, but that's it. Mm-hmm. And when I stopped smoking marijuana, the first thing that happened is my dreams became rocket charged. Like very bizarre, like crazy, lucid, strange.
They are the best
dreams. Not lucid in the sense that I controlled them, but lucid in the sense that I realized I was dreaming, and I was just like having incredibly vivid, vibrant dreams, and I would wake up from them and be certain that what I had done was real. Like I had one dream that I fell asleep on the couch, and while I did fall asleep on the couch, but while I was asleep, I was like, oh, I'm struggling to get this blanket over me while I'm on the couch. And I'm pulling it, but it's stuck under the cushions, and I'm struggling, and I kind of halfway got it over me, and I went to sleep again.
Wow.
Well, when I woke up in the morning, there was no blanket. There's no blanket anywhere near me. It didn't exist. I had a lucid dream about covering myself with a blanket while I was sleeping on this couch. Very strange. And very primal dreams.
Goddamn,
too,
Joe.
like being chased by wolves and running into bears and caves.
Goddamn. All right, let's
really
get to it.
bizarre,
Welcome to the stream, my friends.
And
today we are
from what I've
designing
read, marijuana does something to suppress REM sleep
for the collection,
and that in taking time off of it, your REM sleep just gets jacked through the roof.
You know, I've heard this many times. I've never seen a clinical study on it, but it's the type of thing you hear so many times that you have pretty good confidence that this is true.
Well, we all experienced it.
Yeah.
All my friends who did it experienced it. Ari in particular, who probably smokes as much as I do, maybe more. He experienced it deeply.
I'm glad you mentioned lucid dreams because this is a nice segue to, I think, the greatest discovery I've made of my life. And I want, as
what
all
have you
came through
discovered,
a lucid
my
dream.
friend?
So let me set the stage here. And colony collapse disorder is a threat to worldwide
I'm not going to pain myself and actually
put
put this on straight away for
bees
once.
around the world are being decimated.
Say the name of the disorder again.
Colony collapse disorder.
Collapse disorder.
Now, bees are dying off in enormous quantities. Oklahoma lost 85%
Gonna put a quick promotion on my
of its
story.
beehives last year. This 2016, 2017, the annual loss of bees report. And Maryland lost 75%. Nebraska, I think, lost 60%. I met a beekeeper in Washington State who lost 75% of his 35,000 hives. Wow. Now, Apis mellifera is the honeybee, and it's factory farmed now. And the almond harvest in California is the biggest market for beekeepers who send their bees to the almond orchards. One bee can pollinate 1,000 flowers in a day. So every flower that bee
bitches are active.
is an almond. So it's one of the most
They
bee-dependent
get
crops in
busy.
the world. 35% of your food is directly dependent
Just
upon
like me.
bee
All right, let's go.
pollination. The other 65%, much of that is indirectly dependent. But hay, alfalfa, and clover for cows, all of our dairy is dependent upon bee pollination. All of our berries, all of our nuts, coffee is, even cannabis and other non-dependent plants benefit from what's called buzz pollination, because the bees then can
We'll give
spread
it a
the
bit of
pollen
style
better through the air.
I don't want to over.
It is now thought by many of the
dramatize
entomologists
the,
I've been dealing with that we could have full
the
colony
sleeves,
collapse across
because
the world
the
within
point
10 years.
is not.
The cost, it will be
That is not
astronomical
meant to be
for
the focus
society.
of the
Prices
design.
when food will raise, poverty will increase. You could make the argument that increased poverty leads to terrorism because people are poorer. They're desperate.
Poor, desperate,
And so
easy
colony
to be
collapse now
radicalized.
is much worse than most people
less
realize
educated.
because all the wild bees have now been infected. So 80% of pollination services
I
come
like
from
this
wild
style.
bees and 20%
I'm going to
come
change
from
up the
managed
color for
honeybees.
sure.
Apis mellifera is from honeybee from Europe, brought over in the 1700s. In 1984, the varroa mite was introduced in the United
I'm going
States.
to do this.
And the varroa mite is a parasite on the backs of bees and injects viruses, in particular the deformed wing virus, the Lake Sinai virus, and the black queen cell virus. The deformed wing virus is really the most important one. Bees used to go, and they only live 30 days, but no, they used to go pollinating
Pretty
for
damn
9
short
days.
life,
So they
eh?
leave the
50
hive,
days. Damn.
and they pollinate for about 9 days. They bring back pollen, and that's their service to the hive, and they die off. Now the average time for pollination is only 4 days. In order to fight the mites, they've been using a toxic insecticide called amitraz. Amitraz is
Well, they're
licensed for
shortening
fighting
their short
ticks
lives.
on cattle.
Even
Using
more.
cattle strength doses of amitraz off-label, beekeepers have been drenching their hives with amitraz twice per year. Now the mites have built up tolerance, and now they're up to 9 times a year. They're soaking the hives in order to kill the mites, because the mites are injecting these viruses. This is all hands on deck. This is the proverbial shit's going to hit the fan on this. This is extremely important. And interestingly, it's the #1 bridge issue between liberals and conservatives. So when you're at Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas or Hanukkah, if you want to avoid
These two are actually
talking about
different.
Trump and politics and Hillary or Benghazi or whatever the subject of
Right.
dispute is, talk about bees. Everyone's on
Wow.
board on protecting the bees. So I had a waking dream. First, 1984, I had 2 beehives. I
See if
planted
this
a mushroom
works.
in my garden called the Garden Giant.
Doesn't look like it's gonna
And
work.
one time this summer, I came out to
Kinda
water my
looks
mushrooms,
ugly.
and it was covered with bees. And the bees moved the wood chips aside, and I could see this white mycelium, and they were sipping on the little droplets of oozing from the mycelium.
Yeah,
I got
that
real
shit looks
excited.
chap, man.
And I kept a journal, and for 40 days, from dawn to dusk, there was a continuous convoy of bees
Maybe
to my
I can
mushroom
just-
bed. This is an edible mushroom. And I made note of it. I published it in Harrowsmith Magazine 1988. I put it in one of my books in 1994, and then I forgot about it. So I got involved with the U.S. BioShield Biodefense Program directly after 9/11. You can Google my name, Stamets and smallpox. There's a vetted press release from the U.S. government. They did 2,200 plus analyses of our mushroom extracts. And we found extracts that were highly active against flu viruses, including bird flu, against herpes, and against pox viruses,
There
including
you go. I think
smallpox.
that's pretty.
So I have a patent that issued
Pretty
on
solid.
this. It's a great secondary story because I had, Black Hawk helicopter was coming over my laboratory, all
Don't
this
need
other
to
stuff.
overthink it.
What?
Right, this
But
guy's
I'll
had
get to
such
that.
an interesting
Yeah, I'll
life.
get to that in a second.
Okay.
It's a fun, true conspiracy story. So I had published this research on the antiviral properties of mushrooms, the mycelium, and then
Yeah, I like that.
in Harrowsmith Magazine 1988, I put it in one of my books in
not too
1994,
much.
and then I forgot about it. So I got involved with the U.S. BioShield Biodefense Program directly after 9/11. You can
Yeah,
Google
this
my
is
name,
gonna save me
Stamets, and
some time if I
smallpox.
do it like
There's a vetted
this.
press release from the U.S. government. They did 2,200 plus analyses of our mushroom
Damn, there's
extracts.
some bad
And
buttons,
we
yo.
found extracts that were highly active against flu viruses, including bird
Should have
flu,
warmed up my circles a
against
little bit.
herpes, and against pox viruses, including smallpox.
Even with
So
the
I have a
assistant.
patent that issued on this. It's a great secondary story because I had, Black Hawk helicopter was coming over my laboratory, all this other stuff.
What?
But I'll get to
Okay,
that.
we'll get to that in a
Yeah, we'll get to that in a
second.
second. It's a fun, true conspiracy story. So I had published this research on the antiviral properties of mushrooms, the mycelium, and then I
That's
heard
better.
about the bees. I had raised bees, and then
Always
a friend of mine, Louis
draw
Schwarzberg, we're doing a movie called
with
Fantastic
perspective
Fungi.
of the
It was
whole
in the
image.
making for 10 years.
Would you fuck all
and
your shit up?
Louis came to me and said, Paul, I have 8 patents on fungi that can control termites, ants, mosquitoes. You can Google right now, Stamets can take down Monsanto. There's probably 1,000
Yeah, that's looking
websites
better.
because my patents are disruptive patents. So I can very much control termites and ants from consuming your house for about 20 cents. And I met with all the big companies. But anyhow, so Louis knew about my research on that. I've spoken on this before. And he said, Paul, the mites are killing the bees. Can't you do something to help the mites? And so now, okay, that's 2 stories. We have this BioShield biodefense story and my antiviral stuff. We have me growing the mushrooms in the garden.
So we don't overthink it.
And I hike in the old growth forest a lot. And I'm hiking the old growth forest.
I wanna make it
and
look
the
good.
way I orienteer. It's one of the few skill sets I have. I like just
But I
getting off
don't want
trail.
to obsess.
And I'm in the South Fork of the Hoh River. And I'm deep in the old growth forest. And I come around a corner and I see a bear strike. The bear came up, bam, scratched this tree. A huge paw strike in the tree. And I told my wife, I said, the Washington State, the school system is dependent upon funding from selling timber to the lumber companies. So the school system depended upon timber harvest off of public lands. So in the humans' great wisdom, they decided that the bears were jeopardizing the educational funds in Washington State. So they hired hunters to kill all the bears. So my neighbor killed 400 bears. And that's why we have a salmon run right now on Skookum Inlet and Camilche Point, Washington. There's no bears around because they saw the bears as a threat to the economic stability of the school system.
I don't understand why the bears
because
would
the
be a
bears,
threat.
when they scratch the trees, it would become an entry wound for a polypore mushroom. So I told my wife, if this is true, let's come back in 2 years and see if this polypore mushroom is growing there. These are wood conchs.
Bro's like, give me the
one my hat is
mushrooms.
made from. So we came back 2 years later, and sure enough, this wood conch was growing out of the tree. The tree had died, so they kind of got it right. So when bears scratch trees, resin comes out, and bees are attracted to the propolis to make propolis from the resins to patch their hives from cracks to prevent invaders coming into a beehive. These are all seemingly disparate
I love how
stories, and this is why
Joe's just absorbed.
So I have my garden giant in bed. The bees are coming to. I have the BioShield Biodefense Program where I found these extracts are highly active against viruses.
I know he's completely
Bear
changing the
scratch
standard
trees
of
introduced polypore mushrooms.
and their use within the world.
And then my friend Louis Schwartzberg is saying, how can you help the bees? So, and I highly recommend this to everybody listening, is this lucid dream state. At that state, when you're fully asleep and you just go into the ether of wakefulness, stay there, reside there. We have random access memory before you get your neurological pathways all set up by habit.
Oh, I love that. In the morning, I hate it in the morning when I look at my phone or something and it takes me out of that state.
A new neurological pathway. I had an epiphany. I think I know how to save the bees. Fast forward now, I have multiple patents issuing all over the world.
I know how to save the
We've
bees.
done research for Washington State University.
What a statement.
We've gathered $2.5 million. You can go to www.bees.wsu.edu, so the Washington State University.edu for education, and you'll see the research that we have there. We are now have found that the extracts of Amadou, the one my hat is made from, doubles the lifespans of bees and reduces the deformed wing virus by more than 1,000-fold.
Bro's got a hat made out of mushrooms as well. Like,
hit Joe the friggin' home run. I'm not an entomologist. I have 2 beehives. I'm not even a big beekeeper. But I put these thoughts together that if these mushroom extracts reduce viruses that harm humans, pigs, and birds, what would they do with bees? Now, we all grew up with Winnie the Pooh. So my U.S. patent issued this past year, and now it's issued in Australia, United States, issuing in Europe, Eurasia, and Canada.
How it's coming around.
Open source it for the rest of the world.
In the front there.
But I was waiting on pins and needles because certainly there would be something called prior art. Now patents are issued based on several criteria. One, no prior art. No one's ever mentioned it. Secondly, contrary to conventional wisdom. So if you invented the bicycle, the wheel, and you came up with a tricycle, that's not patentable. That's pretty obvious because it's logical. So you want something that has no evidence in the literature, be public or private or scientific or popular. You want it to contrary to conventional wisdom, which means that you want experts to teach away from your invention. So every time someone out there and tells me I hear that Paul Stamets is full of crap, nothing he says is true, I have one great response. I say, thank you. You're helping my patentability because the more experts that teach away from my invention, the more unconventional my invention is, hence the more patentable it is. The third criteria is usefulness. Benjamin Franklin could not have invented the iPhone. There's no usefulness, and no cell towers. So these are the 3 criteria. After 17 years, it becomes open source. So the idea is to incentivize, inventors. That's why you have the iPhone that destroy all your computers. I had one person call me up on a cell phone and said, how dare you patent this? I go, how dare you speak to me on a cell phone that was enabled by a patent so you could tell me that I shouldn't be patenting things? I'm just like, the contradictions are pretty obvious. So the patents now have issued, and there was no prior art. Even though we all grew up with Winnie the Pooh, we knew that bears went into rotted trees to find honey and beehives. no one, apparently until me, made the connection that bees are attracted to the mycelium in rotted logs because of immunological benefit. Now let's go back in time, because this is a very big picture concept here. 12,000 years ago, we invented agriculture. What did we do?
Oh, maybe
keep it
wide.
Deforest. When we started cutting down the trees, we began to dismantle the immunological mycelial nets of nature. Mycelium needs wood to decompose. You take away the wood, mycelium doesn't have a habitat. Because the mycelium is producing these antiviral compounds rotting the wood, the bees were attracted, and because of deforestation now, we're stressing the bees. So there's not only the lack of habitat, deforestation, there's now neonicotinoids, Bayer and Syngenta, that produces neonics, as they're known, a toxic insecticide, sponsored research in Europe because they didn't believe that neonicotinoids harmed the bees. The researchers then finally published, when they got the results that was contrary to the interests of Syngenta and Bayer, that in fact neonicotinoids harm the second and third generations. Now neonicotinoids are now banned in Europe. They are not banned in the United States, so you have drift of these neonicotinoids on the adjacent fields. So you have loss of wood, deforestation, you have neonicotinoids, you have glyphosates that are associated with GMOs because they interfere with the microbiome of the bees and their gut flora, so they can't detoxify. It's called the cytochrome P450 pathway. We all have it breaking down toxins. So there's a confluence of multiple stressors, but the nail in the coffin by far is the deformed virus. And we have found now that the extracts of this, 1 drop per 1,000 drops, 1 milliliter in a liter, can reduce the viruses in bees by more than 1,000-fold and double their lifespan. So it's a friggin' home run because it protects food biosecurity around the world at a time that food ecosystems are collapsing. But think of the bigger picture here. For millions of years, we were forest people. We began deforestation when we got into agriculture. We began to dismantle the immunological networks of nature, the mycelium that's resident. The fact that these same mushrooms reduce viruses in bees, pigs, birds, people, speaks to me of a bigger concept, that the mycelium is part of the immunity of the ecosystem. And as we lose the debris fields that the mycelium is dependent upon, we begin to dismantle the immunological health of our environment. And zoonotic diseases coming from factory farms, whether they're from pigs or chicken farms. And we have one extraordinary experiment, and this speaks to the Black Hawk helicopter story, is that I was working with the BioShield Biodefense Program directly after 9/11. They contacted me because I wrote an article.
I mean, now we're just going to make sure that this
analysis of all the research on the antiviral properties of mushrooms in scientific literature. I wrote this article, I published it in a peer-reviewed journal. Bioterrorism became the front and center of concern of the U.S. Defense Department. A group of virologists saw my article, and they got funded by Dick Cheney and George Bush, and I have I want to say thank you, ironically, to those two, because they funded the BioShield. It's called Project Biodefense, and they funded it with several $1 billion. And they contacted me because I knew I had this large library of about 700 strains of mushrooms in our culture library. We have a company of 78 great employees, and we had this large library. So they said, we want to test your library based on this article that you've written showing there are antiviral properties in some mushrooms. You have a lot of them. Let's test your library to see if you have antiviral properties. So great. So I started making extracts of mushrooms, the fruit bodies, the mycelium, the little filamentous fuzzy stuff that gives rise to mushrooms. And I sent off 100 extracts at a time, all coded with alphanumeric codes. So the government didn't know what I was sending them. So I get the first reports come back, and I'm flipping through them. No activity against pox viruses, because by far the concern was smallpox. The biggest, we have no immunological defense against it. After 1974, they stopped immunizing. Do you have a smallpox vaccination on your arm? Yeah. So you're probably one of the last ones that were getting it. So I'm going through, and I come to sample 78, and it said high activity. I went, whoa. Sample 81, high activity. Whoa, I got really excited. I looked at my notebook what the codes were, and it was from this mushroom called agarikon that grows exclusively in the old growth forests of the Pacific Northwest. This is the longest living mushroom in North America. It's a perennial polypore. It looks like a giant beehive by coincidence, up on a tree.
See if you can get a picture of that, Jamie.
And so, agarikon, A-G-A-R-I-K-O-N. And so I got real excited, and I was given a contact person, because he had one point of contact with the U.S. Defense Department, a physician. And I called him up saying, these research results are wonderful. He goes, what research results? I go, Federal Express just delivered me this whole dossier on the first 100 samples.
Wow, look at that thing.
And he goes, you're not supposed to get those.
Damn. Was that lion's mane?
I said, well, I'll photocopy and send them to you. So
it looks like lion's mane.
Didn't think that was too funny, but that's the U.S. government sometimes is not very well organized. The left hand doesn't talk to the right hand. So we got these research results.
That's crazy. That looks like a stick up a dude's butt.
Well, this one is particularly unusual because it was attached to an upper branch. It fell through the air.
Oh, wow.
It hit the other branch. It teeter-tottered. And then it regrew its mycelium and it connected back into the mother mycelium inside the tree, and then it grew 2 legs. Whoa. So this was first described by Dioscorides in 65 AD as elixirium ad longum vitam, the elixir of long life. So this has been used in Greek pharmacopoeia for thousands of years.
So please get back to your story. Sorry for the interruption.
No, it's fine.
Childish ways.
So anyhow, I'm up in Canada, and one of my managers calls me up and says, Paul, there's a helicopter over the laboratories. I go, no big deal. Helicopters come and go. He goes, no, it's really close. And I said, how close? He goes, listen. Choom, 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 choom. I go, whoa, that's really close. I go, what are the numbers in the back of the helicopter? And he goes, there are no numbers. It's a Black Hawk helicopter. And I went, oh my gosh. Now, just because this is very new in the program, because when you have an antidote to a weapon, then it can be weaponized by terrorists.
But
so they didn't know who, not everybody in the government knew who I was. Even though I was working with a Project Biodefense, I was still sort of an unknown entity. And I filed a patent application on this. And so I told my manager, okay, shut down the business, give everybody cultures of this mushroom, which was agarikon. I don't want to know who has them. Shut down the business, everyone spread. So we decentralized ourselves at our target.
But hold on, so let me stop you right there. So you're in Canada. Your lab is where?
What I want at the top
is
a nice black.
And the helicopters are flying over your lab. What happens then?
Nice
black. They were trying to land. They were spooking us.
They were doing it on purpose.
They were doing it on purpose. They were hovering
to let you know they're there.
I don't know what they were doing. I mean, they're at treetop level, right over the friggin' laboratory.
Right.
So I had everyone go in their car. Asked everyone to go in their car, shut down the business immediately, and decentralize us as a target. So later on, when I came back, I called my people in the Defense Department saying, what the hell's going on here? And they go, oh, geez, sometimes the left hand doesn't talk to the right. We're sorry. So eventually...
So how did they find out that just from your patent?
Oh, my God.
Well, the patent, I filed the patent and it disappeared. Most patent applications, when you file them, show up on the U.S. patent homepage within a year or two.
Right.
I filed this patent, and 4 or 5 years later, it still had not been published. So I get a hold of my patent attorney, who gets a hold of the patent office, and the U.S. Department of Defense considered it to be a national security.
We can see what we're
so
doing
they quarantined my patent, took it out of the patent office, and so it could not be seen by potential terrorists, because then it could have an antidote to smallpox. So I had to do an intergovernmental agency trace to recall the patent from DOD. They had meetings, they allowed it to be released because it was a natural product. And so the patent then was put back into the patent application queue, and it was approved in 2013. I filed it in 2004. So we have now done work at the University of Mississippi School of Pharmacy. We've isolated 2 novel anti-smallpox molecules. We also have done work at the Tuberculosis Research Institute with Dr. Scott Franzblau and University of Illinois Chicago. We've identified a new anti-tuberculosis molecule. Agarikon in Dioscorides' time in Greek culture was used for treating consumption, later thought to be known as tuberculosis. We have found that extracts of this mushroom are dually active against bacteria and viruses. Most people who die from viral pneumonia actually die from bacterial pneumonia. They get a viral infection. Their immune system overamps, and as a response, lungs get flooded with liquid, bacteria set up, and bacterial pneumonia usually kills people who actually get a flu virus. They die from bacterial pneumonia. So to find a natural product that's dually active against viruses and bacteria is medically significant. So there's a good argument for natural products because you have a consortium of protective agents that are living in this soup of this extract that can help protect you. So this has now led on to our discovering molecules active against HPV, the human papillomavirus. 70% or more of women have HPV. 50%
That's a very
of men.
controversial vaccine, apparently. It's very dangerous.
Well, I'm not anti-vaccination, but
I'm not either.
But I'm curious why they don't recommend the vaccine after the age of 24. I can't wrap my mind around that.
I think they're just trying to prevent infection from sexually active kids.
Well, you're sexually active after the age of 24, so why wouldn't they?
Right, but they're sexually active before then.
But if you didn't have the infection before 24 and you're still active at the age of 24, why wouldn't they recommend the vaccination after the age of 24? Maybe there's a good medical reason.
They don't recommend it post 24? Is that what you're saying?
Post 24.
Oh, so post 24 they don't recommend it because they think maybe you already have it?
I don't know the answer to that.
That's bizarre.
I've never been able to get someone to explain to me why it's the case.
Mushrooms can suppress the expression of this? Is that what you're saying?
The ingredients within the mushrooms, we have found 5 molecules authenticated by NIH Virology.
Maybe this would be pimp ass this jacket.
Which mushrooms?
All the polypores that I have been talking about, reishi, agarikon, amadou, are likely, I can't say de facto all of them, to have varying amounts of these constituents. So these mushroom extracts are a huge consortia of antiviral and antibacterial compounds. Now, as I mentioned, there's maybe 5 million species of fungi. There's about 150,000 species of mushrooms. Drink that shit with some cacao. Identified around 14,000. So think of from experiential evidence over thousands of years of human experimentation. It'd be like you went into a library and there's 14,000 books in your library, 14,000 species. Our ancestors started selecting each of these species and testing them. We've narrowed the field down to about 200 species, of which 50 species are superstars that have no adverse effects to human ingestion, that have been used for a very long period of time. And within that set of 50 species, we're finding these mushrooms which have tremendous potential health benefit. So this is why I'm so excited in the field of mycology is we have translational science. We have applied mycology. And I think based on what we've discovered, we can make the argument that we should save the old growth forest as a matter of national defense. Our fungal genomes are essential for our future and present survival. The more we eliminate these landscapes of biodiversity, the more we're losing potential agents that can fight disease. And so this is something that I think we can build a bridge between conservatives and liberals, because Osama bin Laden didn't have access to an old growth forest. We did. And we do. And I think this is really just indicative of many other things that we can discover if we pay attention to the vast genomic resources we have in the biodiversity of the ecosystems that are still intact.
Now, do you recommend for personal consumption any particular mushrooms, any particular supplements?
In terms of recommendations for gourmet mushrooms, I can make those. In terms of recommendations for medicinal mushrooms, I cannot make recommendations. I'm legally tied by the FDA. I cannot make recommendations.
Can you recommend a website that perhaps would recommend?
Well, I do recommend eating gourmet mushrooms for
Which ones
food.
Do you consume?
Shiitake, lion's mane, maitake, and reishi and chaga.
And these all have medical benefits as well?
I don't know the difference between a gourmet and a medicinal mushroom anymore.
They're just mushrooms.
Yeah, all gourmet mushrooms are medicinal mushrooms.
Really? So shiitake mushrooms are medicinal?
Shiitake mushrooms are
it adds a little bit of flavor to it.
The big stars right now by far are reishi, chaga, and lion's mane.
What about portobello? They taste too good. They can't be that good for you.
Portobellos have a problem.
I knew it.
All mushrooms should be cooked, and portobellos in particular should be cooked at high temperatures.
Why?
There is an unfortunate group of compound called agaritines, Agarotines,
now we start
hydrazines that are heat unstable. So the good news is you should cook them. And if you cook them well, then those mushrooms are not a problem. If you don't cook them well, then these hydrazines are potentially problematic. Now, nature's a numbers game. So there are beneficial compounds that in some balance may outweigh the negative effects of the hydrazines, the agarotines in these mushrooms, but that jury is still out, so to speak.
What are the negative benefit or the negative effects of this?
This is an explosive area of conversation, and puts my life in danger. So I reserve the right not to answer your question.
Whoa. I didn't expect that. It puts your life in danger talking about portobello mushrooms? He's looking at me silently. I will respectfully move on.
Let's play that back.
So it puts your life...
And puts my life...
Negative effects of this.
But that jury is still out, so to speak.
What are the negative benefit or the negative effects of this?
This is an explosive area of conversation, and puts my life in danger. So I reserve the right not to answer your question.
Whoa. I didn't expect that. It puts your life in danger talking about portobello mushrooms? He's looking at me silently.
The straight stare.
Respectfully move on.
Like, shut the fuck up, Joe, and move on.
Anybody who's interested, just Google that and get back to me. You know what? Next, I'm going to have a guy who is the same height as Paul, and he's going to have a mask on, and we're going to have some sort of electric box that distorts his voice.
No, but the good news is...
I can tell you the story.
Yeah, there's lots of mushrooms that have a tremendous benefit. Mm-hmm. And there are compounds inside of portobello mushrooms that are very beneficial. And in fact, there is a positive study with some breast cancer patients, a breast cancer study, showing that that button mushrooms can confer benefits. So there is that. You know, we were funded by NIH with a $2.2 million for a breast cancer clinical study on turkey tail mushrooms. And turkey tail mushrooms are fantastic as adjuncts to conventional therapy. This clinical study that was conducted, funded by NIH and the University of Minnesota Medical School and Bastyr Medical College, showed a dose-response curve specifically in supporting the immune system by taking turkey tail mushrooms. And the more you took, the more benefit there was. I have a TED Med talk that's very popular in front of 800 physicians, where my mother, who is challenged with advanced stage 4 breast cancer, who is now almost 93 years of age. She had advanced stage 4 breast cancer when she was 84 years of age, given less than a few months to live. And she had metastasized tumors.
I'm kind of vibing it.
Breast was erupting with a very, very bad carcinoma. And she is alive, well, and fully recovered today. She had a chemotherapy using Herceptin and a short time Taxol. She had a very bad reaction to Taxol, but there's scientific articles now have been published showing that turkey tail mushroom constituents help conventional therapies like chemotherapy with Herceptin and making Herceptin work better. So there's a nice blending of integrative medicine with using natural products with conventional medicine. I will never say that you should not consult a physician. I will never say that you should not use conventional medicine. You should. It's the state of the art of science is right there. But the state of the art of science is that we can upregulate immunity with these mushrooms, and that's your front line of defense. And then the other conventional therapies that are being practiced now combine very, very nicely, according to many physicians and reports, showing that the combination of turkey tail mushrooms in combination with conventional therapy can have a significant difference in improving your immunological defense.
No, I absolutely agree with you that conventional treatments are state-of-the-art, and this is state-of-the-art science. When you're talking about dealing with cancer, you should deal with oncologists that are at the cutting edge. But they're not state-of-the-art when it comes to the preventing of these things. And that's a giant issue that a lot of people have when it comes to nutrition, lifestyle, mitigating stress, all the various factors that contribute to a bunch of different health ailments. Do you think
really
that
like this
mushrooms could also play a factor in that as well. And
absolutely. There's a great epidemiological study that came out of Japan, and Dr. Ikikawa was an epidemiologist that worked for the National Cancer Center in Tokyo. And they noticed in surveying people in Japan in the 1960s, early 1970s, there was a drop in the overall cancer rate in this one population in Nagano Prefecture in Japan. So he was sent there by the National Cancer Center of Tokyo, by the government, to say, what are these people doing in this one cluster of villages where they have statistically significant less cancer rates? We're talking about 30% less than the national average. And after exhaustive study, he found that they were eating enoki mushrooms, a lot of them, because the enoki mushrooms are really thin ones, like really tall stems. You can buy them in the store. Well, there were the big farming centers for enoki mushrooms there, and then the blemished ones, as cultivators know, you don't sell to the public the ones that have little spots on them or deformed, but they're given to the workers, and so their workers and then their families eat a higher per capita consumption of enoki mushrooms than the other residents of Japan. So they found that specifically the consumption of enoki mushrooms resulted in a reduction of cancer across the board, of all cancers, statistically significant. I think over 220,000 people in this epidemiological survey. I've written about 10 articles for the Huffington Post, and you can Google Stamets Huffington Post and enoki mushrooms and see all the citations on enoki mushrooms, on lion's mane, on agarikon, all these mushrooms I'm talking about. They're all peer-reviewed past physicians. They're all very short articles, but they summarize a lot of the research that I'm talking about.
That's amazing. What do you know about the cordyceps mushroom?
I know a fair amount about cordyceps.
Yeah, I'm fascinated for two reasons. One, because of a supplement that I take that my company makes called Shroom Tech Sport. Sorry for the name. My apologies in advance. But it's based on athletic performance. But the Shroom Tech is based on the cordyceps and B12 and a bunch of different adaptogens, and the idea being that when you take that, it benefits athletic performance, benefits
I want to make it pop.
Oxygen utilization.
But I also...
And apparently they discovered this from... It's a weird one because they grow it on a caterpillar.
Make it too much.
Do you know about all that?
Yeah. Cordyceps is now, it's been split into several different genera.
Yeah, that's what I was going to bring up.
Yeah.
The other one is the
balance
one that explodes on
popping
ants.
Yeah, there's the...
and being simple.
There's Cordyceps sinensis, now known as Ophiocordyceps sinensis. Cordyceps has about 500 species in it. It's been a very complicated taxonomy because when researchers would go in the Himalayas and they find these caterpillars with the cordyceps mushrooms coming out of it, very good scientists. And they did just what I would do. They would take it in the laboratory, they'd break it open and take a piece of tissue from the inside. That's called cloning. So you just capture the genetic material, you grow out the culture. Very confusing because there is 5 different fungi. They're called anamorphs. Cordyceps is a dimorphic fungus. What that means is it has 2 forms. It's got a mold state and it's got a mushroom state. The mushroom state comes up like a little club, looks like your finger, like a orange little finger coming up out of the ground.
So you can find that, Jamie.
And the
there it is.
Yeah.
So is this a expired caterpillar?
I can't actually see the species.
Doesn't feel right.
They look like they're beetles.
Hard to tell. There's a couple of things here.
So there's a number of cordyceps species. So when there was a lot of scientific dispute on what the true anamorph. Now, it's 2 sides of the same coin. You see the cordyceps, and then you clone it, and you get this mold growing, and then people will grow up the mold. Well, now we know there are several species of molds that are growing inside the caterpillar. So the true Cordyceps sinensis is now identified as Hirsutella sinensis. That's the true
people
one.
Won't get that if it is.
Bacillomyces and Metarhizium and all these other ones are not considered to be the true organism. They're chasing the other cordyceps mold inside of the mushroom.
Whoa. You're freaking me out, Paul. I can't keep up with you, man.
So
this is going to be one
relax,
that
bro.
Many
It's a polyculture.
Show your
It's a
shit.
polyculture with several different entomopathogenic
Show
fungi.
your
These
shit,
are fungi
man.
that kill insects. So, I mean, this is very disruptive because, the FDA and the labeling and how do you label this and what do you do and who's right and who's wrong and how do you get the labeling to conform with the current taxonomy based on DNA research. the good news is, based on the best of my knowledge, several of these companies that are selling these cordyceps, the anamorphs, even though they may not be the true Cordyceps sinensis, those also confer benefits. So you can argue in a sense about different species. The problem with this is there's no less than 1,000 peer-reviewed articles on Cordyceps sinensis, and no one, or hardly anyone, no one knows what species they were actually growing.
Wow.
Because we don't know which of these anamorphs they were actually growing.
Is this recent information? That
all very recent. All in the past 4 or 5 years, and especially in the past 2 years. So
wow.
It's taxonomy is in flux because of DNA PCR amplification. And the region of DNA that they've chosen to amplify, there are idiosyncratic to the species. Now that story has changed. Whole genome sequencing is really the only way to go about this, where they sequence the entire genome. And so
I was gonna make
there's
it
a lot of
small,
elasticity or plasticity in the expression of DNA. Now, going back to what we've been talking about this whole interview,
this is where more of the really getting that individuality,
an environmental stimulus
at the start,
has a selective influence on the genomic expression of the individual, the species, yourself. And so you upregulate the genes that are otherwise quote unquote asleep. And so what we're seeing now is that epigenetic influences can cause different DNA expressions. And so what was considered to be conformity of a species and DNA types before, like 99%, and that was thought that, oh, they're the same species. Now we know that's highly inaccurate. So what was accurate a few years ago is considered to be highly inaccurate today. The science is changing very, very rapidly, and the regulatory environment cannot catch up. So it doesn't really matter except for the following. And this is, I do make a recommendation here. Make sure your mushrooms or your whatever products you're consuming are certified organic, and please don't buy them from China. Anyone who's been to China, I've been to China several times, the amount of massive air pollution there is horrific. And the chain of custody, as we call it, where these people are getting their mushrooms, they mixed, oftentimes distributors mix suppliers, and it's a form of quote-unquote Russian roulette. We've done analyses on Chinese-sourced mushrooms, and they've had up to 2,200 parts per million of lead, where 2 or 3 capsules is toxic. So why would you take a medicinal mushroom that's contaminated with heavy metals and pesticides if you're trying to improve your immune system at the same time you're sabotaging your immune system? So getting mushrooms from clean environments is critically important. Unfortunately, because of our USDA organic program, they can borrow from the organic programs of China and still say they're certified organic. So you really need to buy U.S.-grown, certified organic mushrooms that have a clear chain of custody, and hopefully one that is from a reputable supplier or scientist and not somebody who's just trying to make money. There's a lot of opportunistic companies right now who are just trying to exploit and ride the bandwagon of the popularity of medicinal mushrooms without really having done their homework or without fully informing the public that their mushrooms are actually coming from China when they are not.
What is the strain of cordyceps mushroom that erupts, that infects ants, kills them, sprouts out of them, and then explodes and infects the ants near them? And other ants will drag that ant, knowing that it's infected, deep, deep away into the forest to get it away from the colony.
Just had Cordyceps lloydii up on the screen there.
Pull that up.
Yeah, Cordyceps lloydii, unilateralis is another one. A lot of these zombie movies you've been seeing have been based on cordyceps. And actually, I was a character in Hannibal Lecter.
You were?
Yeah, in the series. I think it's number 5. And this, I think, Elvin Stamets was this anesthesiologist.
They gave you your last name?
Yeah, he used my last name. And
why didn't they just call you Paul?
Well, they do on Star Trek. I'm a character on Star Trek now.
I know.
Yeah, they actually call me Paul Stamets on Star Trek.
But no way.
So Hannibal Lecter, the series, I had all these people write me, say, "Oh my gosh, you're this evil doctor who overdoses his patients with drugs and then puts them in the backyard and then inoculates them with mushrooms, just like cordyceps, coming out of the, so you can have mushrooms going in the backyard." And some of the Star Trek people called me up in August of 2016. I'm talking to them. CBS, set it up. They have to talk to you. They saw my TED Talk, and they said, "Paul, we're the writers of the new Star Trek Discovery series. We're kind of stuck. you know, we want to talk to you. We saw your TED Talk. We're really interested. And I go, wait a second, are you the one who put me in Hannibal Lecter? He goes, yeah. And I go, well, let's get it right this time, you know. So I said, okay. I said, foolishly.
Nice silver button. I reckon that works.
Foolishly, I said, turn on your tape recorder. You know, give me the general idea, and let me run with it. And they said, okay.
I didn't even upload my story to say I was live.
Foolishly, I said, I'm a Star Trek fan, which is not foolish, but I want no money for these ideas. I give you all my intellectual property. I want science fiction to predict science fact. The great thing about Star Trek is the flip phone and the iPad. I mean, those came out in Star Trek, and then they became reality. I said, so you have a unique opportunity here of forming our future. Let's collaborate to create a future that's better for our future generations by inspiring students and young people to get excited about the science so they can help populate the universities to create the inventions that can help save this planet that's in jeopody. And so I ran with the Star Trek theme, and
it says posted 42 minutes ago. Yet
and astromycologist Paul Stamets is using the mycelium spore drive. It has become, I couldn't believe it. We're watching this thing, and the Star Trek, the main theme of Star Trek is based on mycelium. And the concepts that I gave them, they've elaborated this. I mean, 6 days of Sunday, so they've really taken it.
This is as some sort of a propulsion system?
Back in.
It's a propulsion system because in my TED Talk, and I've been talking about this a long time about networks. We have the mycelial network, we have the computer internet, we have the neurological network in our brains,
and
the organization of dark matter conforms to string theory.
Good.
So these are three archetypes, the same archetype, the same dimensional structures stacked on top of each other. And nature builds upon its prior successes. So networks reward themselves by surviving from catastrophe.
All this stuff.
So I said, and I'm still bound by confidentiality, and there's an incredibly strict confidentiality agreement that I can only state which has been publicly displayed. But the mycelium spore drive allows through the internet of nature, you might say, to be able to go into hyperspace immediately by tapping into the mycelial archetype. And so astromycologist Stamets now is plugging himself into the mycelial network of the universe, and they can jump rather than using their standard hyperdrives, which you see them streaming across for hours from one part of the universe to the other. They can show up immediately and then disappear.
Is this something that you think could actually be real one day?
Okay, we're pushing the envelope on this one. Baby. This is pushing the envelope on this one. But if you look at the multiverse, and I've had one
getting deep
or
now,
two
boys
in particular multiverse experiences where time and reality has changed in a way that I cannot explain. It's so.
How so? What do you mean?
It's so incredibly profound that I still cannot wrap my mind around it. And
these are psilocybin experiences?
Psilocybin experience. So I think the psilocybin experience might be one portal, and now I'm going to sound like Terrence McKenna, of entering into the multiverse. The idea that time can be bent, that there are multiple universes occurring simultaneously in different realities. And I've had one experience in particular that is just unfathomable to me. I don't know how to explain it.
Give it a shot.
Okay.
Bro's getting deep. Let's go, Joe. Nice work.
This is
beautiful hosting.
This is a very deeply personal experience to me, but I was going to the Evergreen State College. I had the Drug Enforcement Administration license. My brother John went to Yale University. He got a graduate scholarship in neurophysiology at the University of Washington. He came out to Washington State in Seattle. I was living in Olympia, Washington. I had a cabin up in the mountains near Darrington, Washington. Then the summertime for 3 years, I set chokers. I was a logger. I really believe in the school of hard knocks and the blending of academia with blue-collar hard work.
Is this a trip?
I love chopping wood. I love running a chainsaw. I love hard labor. I think. It gives my mind some respite to be able to think. So I'm in this highly academic environment. My brother John he died unfortunately 2 years ago. He got me involved in mushrooms. So I'm going to segue and set the stage here, but I need another 2 minutes to set the stage here. So I'm growing up in a small town in Ohio called Columbiana. My brother John is going to Yale. He comes back one day. and he gives me a book that he's using for his class, but he's on break. And he says, and I'm really fascinated. Now, John went to Mexico, Colombia, came back with great stories of eating psilocybin mushrooms, and he's my older brother. I just idolized him. And he has a book called Altered States of Consciousness. And so I said, John, can I borrow your book? He said, sure. And I said, but Paul, I need it back. After my break is over, I'm going back to college, and this is part of our textbook. So I borrowed his book, Altered States of Consciousness, and I'm just fascinated reading it, about all these different ways of expanding your consciousness. I'm 14 years of age. And so my best friend, Ryan Snyder, says, Paul, can I borrow your book? We're hanging together all the time. And I go, yeah, but I need it back. And so he borrows my book, and he doesn't return it. A day, several days pass, a week pass, 2 weeks pass. My brother's coming back on break. He said, I needed that book back, Paul. And I go to Ryan. I go, Ryan, I need my book. And Ryan just kept on avoiding answering the subject. And so I said, finally, give me my book. And Ryan goes, I can't give it to you, Paul. I said, why? He says, my dad burned it. I said, your dad burned my brother's book? I go, WTF. I didn't use this phrase back then. I said, oh, my God. And I have a shout out to Ryan Snyder's father that because of that event, it stimulated my interest in altered states of consciousness even more. So so John goes to Yale and goes to the University of Washington. I have this DEA permit. I'm at the Evergreen State College. John calls me up. And he says, Paul, I think I found some psilocybin mushrooms. John said, you're really smart. You've been collecting psilocybin cubensis in Colombia and Mexico, but they're much more complicated up here. And I said, let me ask you a few questions. I said, okay, John, do you take a spore print? And he goes, yes. And I go, is the spores purple-brown? And he goes, yes, they are purple-brown. I go, good. Okay. John, does it have a separable gelatinous pellicle? And he goes, what's that? And I go, well, break the cap. These are growing on wood chips. Break the cap and separate the cap very slowly. Do you see a little skin that's translucent? And he breaks it and he goes, yeah, I see that skin. I said, John, they're growing on wood chips. And he goes, yes.
Make this make sense,
Are they turning bluish? He goes, yes, they're staining really bright blue. I go, wow.
Maybe that's
I said, John, how many did you find? He goes, you would not believe it. It's a huge amount. I said, wait. I said, but he said, Paul, they're in a very sensitive place. You better come up here right away. So I jumped in my car and I drove up from Olympia to Seattle, about 60, 70 miles. I get to his house, and John's there, and I go, well, where are we going? He goes, well, we need some grocery bags,
This
and,
is a wild.
let's get on our bikes.
Unless I heard it wrong.
And let's go down there. I go, well, why all the secrecy? And the problem is, well, you'll see. And it was the end of Boat Street, and right at the University of Washington, right off of University Avenue, there's Boat Street. And we get there, and right across the street is a police substation. So we're there, and it was an eruption of this mushroom. There had to be 10,000, 30,000 mushrooms, I don't know. It was about 50 feet by 30 feet, with it all been mulched with wood chips. There was an eruption that picked up, trash and, debris that picked up 6 inches. It was solid mushrooms. There are mushrooms everywhere. I've, to this day, never seen so many mushrooms in one concentrated area. So we waited till the police cars went away, and we're kind of idling there. And then the police cars would go away, and from the substation, we'd start picking mushrooms, and we fill up a groceries bag or two. And then the other students are walking by. What are you doing? Oh, nothing.
Yeah.
And then we eventually go, there's plenty for everybody. So so it was like pretty soon everyone's all hanging out as a little group, like at the bus stop, right? We're not really waiting for the bus, right? We're waiting for the police cars to go away.
Right. And
then we picked all these mushrooms. And so we got about 8 or 10 grocery bags full of these mushrooms.
How bizarre.
It turned out to be a new species called Psilocybe stuntzii, named after
a new species.
It's new species.
New as in hadn't been discovered before.
Had
you
never
guys
been described in the scientific literature before.
So you picked a mushroom that no one knew existed before, hadn't been
described scientifically. We had known about it for about 3 years, but this is the largest eruption, and from that collection became part of of the type collection that anchored the species taxonomically. So I think some of the specimens still exist in herbaria around the world because it's the reference standard. So we go back to the house, and it's like, we got to dry them. So we lay out newspapers, and the whole newspapers were just covered with mushrooms. And so that night, we just about 4 guys from Yale, all neurophysiology, all scientists, on the scientist track, and let's eat them. And so, I mean, this is not very potent. They're 1/10 the potency of cubensis, so we made smoothies. And oh my gosh, talk about the gag reflex. So we had to make these smoothies. I had to eat 50 of them in order to have a dose equivalent to what salami cubensis would be. So I knew that. So we made these incredibly distasteful milkshakes, and we chugged them and we drank them. And then amazing experience. I bonded with my brother. It was beautiful. And then you're peeking at this experience. You look around, and there's like tens of thousands of these mushrooms. Like, oh my gosh, all for science. And so I go to bed, and I'm laying in bed, and full blown experience, and can barely sleep because all the colors are keeping me awake, and my mind is racing. And then I have a lucid dream. And I'm dreaming, and I wake up, and I
really
go
a
downstairs,
surprise.
and I had this crazy dream. And what's your dream? And I said, I saw thousands of cattle dead, baking in the sun. I said, I think there's going to be a nuclear war. But what could kill all these cattle? There's a time of the Reagan administration and all that, and the tension was really high between the Soviet Union and the United States. And they said, and they were joking with me, saying, "Oh, well, okay, when is it going to happen?" I go, "I know. I was in Olympia, and I needed to rush up to Darrington to stay in my cabin because my books were up there, and my manuscript was up there. I need to save my research." So they laughed and they laughed and they said, "Well, when's the world going to end, Paul?" And I go, "Well, it's not this weekend. That was like in 2 days. It's next weekend." So they wrote on the calendar, December 1st. I put it in my book. I think it's 1975. The end of the world. They wrote, Paul predicts the end of the world. So we forgot about it. Massive rains the next week. Huge amounts of snowfall. And then on Wednesday, Thursday, temperature inversion. And it flipped to 75 to 85 degrees. All the snow started to melt. All the rivers were flooding. And my little cabin was right next to this river that would swell from from morning to night. It would go up 6 feet just from the snow melt because it's very close to this volcano and big glaciers. I said, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my manuscript, all my research. I need to get up there. And so I'm watching the news, and the roads are being closed. So I had to go through Rockport, Washington, the back way in order to get back to my cabin. I get to my cabin, and the bank had eroded about 10 feet. I was only about 10, 12 feet away from
So I don't know which one makes more sense
right now. My cabin
now.
was on the verge of falling into it, but I got my manuscript. I got all my books.
If I'm looking from the
material
back,
I had, but I couldn't get out of there because the roads had been closed. And so I had to wait 2 days, and the roads then opened up, and I drove out of the valley into the Snohomish Valley, and I went around the bend, and there the sun, it was a brilliant sunny day, a warm day, and there floating in the fields were hundreds and hundreds of dead cattle.
Whoa.
How do you explain that? I entered, I think, into the multiverse.
Whoa. Now, as a scientist, you realize when you say something like that, you open yourself up to ridicule. Do you feel hesitant to communicate these ideas?
Well, to a degree, yes. But, I'm 62 years of age, and, at one point, I just don't care. I just don't care, This is true. This happened to me, and I can push the envelope on these ideas because the credibility of my research is well established. I can save the bees. Do you care whether I have taken psilocybin mushrooms, if I can save your farm, your family, your country, or the world billions of dollars and protect biosecurity?
I care more.
I care more. That's right. Yeah. So I'm telling you things. I'm not making these up.
I don't think you are.
I don't have to.
I just wondered.
But just because you can't explain it does not mean it's not true.
Right.
And I think that we need to accept the fact that the reality is not limited to the perception that we have traditionally used.
That's a beautiful way to describe it. Let's end with that. That's perfect.
Thank you, brother.
Yay.
Paul, thank you so much. I'm so glad you came here. And thank you to all the people that recommended you and turned me on to your work. And can we do this again?
I'd love to.
Please.
Thanks.
All right. And if people want to research more of your stuff, fungi.com. And what was the other website?
And hostdefense.com.
Hostdefense.com.
Oh, look at that
and
perfect
there's a ton
line.
of other information, TED Talk.
And I have a youtube.com/ Paul Stamets site. And Louis Schwarzberg, shout out. We have a fantastic fungi.com. Check it out. Louis and I are coming out with a movie that describes much of this stuff.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, brother.
Woo, that was awesome.
I love how pumped Joe gets. He really loves what he does, eh? Just loves a good chat about some crazy mushrooms. Alright, what do we got? What do we got next, guys? What do we got? Is that another Paul Stamets? We can do more of Paul. He's a pretty interesting guy. Let's have a listen to this. Podcast to podcast, say.
Joe Rogan Experience.
Train by day, Joe Rogan podcast by night.
All day. Oh no.
So, Jamie, what was your question?
It was two.
Why does that look so
But it was
bad?
really like, because I wouldn't know.
Hardcore science question.
Yeah. Based on physics.
Okay.
In theory, if you were in space and you maybe ejaculated, is it possible that the ejaculate would propel you backwards? Like, send, like, is it propulsion? Is there enough power in there?
What a way
There's
to
only
come
one way to
in
find out.
to the
Depends
next
on how long
podcast.
you hold it in for. Right?
Right.
Like, if you didn't jerk off for
Bruh.
like 4 months, and then you have like the mother load.
Still not. I mean, you need something to go one way, so you go the
Yeah.
other way.
Yeah.
And Lex had an answer, but I don't know.
What's the answer?
What?
We had a thought, I guess.
What if you blow out at the same time?
Yeah. I think in space the biodynamics of the liquids is different. I think it's actually difficult to have sex in space, and to get people pregnant in space. That's
Has
what I
anybody
read.
ever gotten pregnant on the space station? Are they allowed even to have sex?
No, nobody has officially had sex in space.
Officially.
Officially, but unofficially, of course, people have
I
tried.
wonder if they have. I mean, how monitored are they?
There is a Wikipedia page about sex in space, and it's actually pretty detailed.
But it's Wikipedia, so you know it's half bullshit.
There's citations. I encourage people to look into it, read in detail. I mean, it's a serious problem. If you want to, colonize space, you probably want to have a lot of sex and
Yeah.
get pregnant and have kids. And
Well, don't you think they'll develop some sort of gravity generating machines?
yeah, absolutely, you have to. Like Jeff Bezos talks about this a lot,
Yeah.
like how you create artificial gravity in space. Because for Jeff Bezos, the likely way to colonize space is to have space stations. Elon is more focused on colonizing planets, Mars.
Yeah.
So both are obviously going to be necessary, and you're gonna need to have gravity in order to get laid.
Bro, the first people that make that trip. Ooh.
Yeah, Jamie was saying he wants to go.
I don't know about, I mean, I'm not that trip, but
Yeah.
a trip.
You go eventually?
No, why not?
Oh, dude, why?
I'm
What do
with
you
Jamie,
die out there?
baby.
Okay, you're going to die.
Everybody dies.
Yeah, but you don't
Joe.
want to die that way, dude.
If you get to decide one way to die, that's not one of the worst
Oh,
ways.
it's the worst way. You're going to die in space, running out of air.
You don't know how it's going to happen. Could
What
be
about-
on re-entry.
You could you could just cook it instantly.
Could be on the way up.
You get hit by a micro
Bro,
meteorite.
why is this not
While you're
fucking
asleep up
working?
there.
Could be.
Imagine standing on Mars, looking back at Earth.
Going, what the fuck did I do?
Yeah,
Why did I do this?
yeah, and then having kids on Mars and
Whoa,
then
those
teaching
poor
them.
kids.
We came from there.
You think homeschooling's bad? How about space
Yeah.
schooling?
Just imagine the crazy shit that happens on Mars. I mean, it's going to be what 100,000 people.
Yeah, and so you're going to get one psycho who's going to run everything,
Mhm.
and they're going to take over.
Yeah,
Probably some cult leader convinces everybody to do it his way.
it's going to be a sex cult, 100%.
100%.
And we're back to sex in space.
Right, they're going to say, like, listen, if Elon is their man, Elon wants to procreate every chance he can.
Mhm.
How many kids does he have now? Allegedly.
Double digits.
No, we don't even know how many.
Well,
Because they think he's got secret kids.
they think. Who's they?
They! The
keep
fucking
count.
people that run the world.
Is there a Wikipedia page on this?
There probably is. He's probably got secret kids.
Secret kids.
Yeah. When you have, like, what does he have? Like $300+ billion?
It's growing.
You can You can have a few ladies here, there, all over the place having kids. There's a lot of ladies that just want to have kids. They don't want a guy around.
Yeah.
Especially when they get a little older.
There's a castle in the south of France with a harem, just a bunch
waiting
of kids.
for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, just waiting for daddy to
Allegedly.
to land his rocket ship.
Online it officially says at least 12.
Yeah, at least 12 kids. See, nobody even knows.
To get
Imagine
this right,
no one knows how many kids you have. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah. Well, it's the situation Genghis Khan was in, you know.
Well, he was doing it a little differently. He was a little bit more forceful.
Actually, I mean, there's a lot of different perspectives on that. Like what's the book on Genghis Khan? So first of all, there's obviously the Dan Carlin, Wrath of the Khans, and in that series of podcasts, he criticizes the book Jack Weatherford. Making of the Modern World. Genghis Khan and the Making of the Modern World. Genghis Khan, the Mongols, and the Making of the Modern World.
Yeah, so that's the there it is. Nice. That is one of the things that Dan Carlin talks about, that when enough time has passed, that they sort of look at these marauders and murderers in a different light and saying, oh, he opened up trade to the east. Sure. Also, killed 10% of the population of Earth, lit people on fire and launched them on catapults onto thatched roofs.
Well, I think actually Dan Carlin makes a really good point. How long do you wait until that you could tell these kinds of stories about Hitler? I think that's the example he uses.
That's what he uses.
But you want to be historically accurate here, and Genghis Khan, there's a lot of different perspectives, including opening up trade, and including what was the protocol based on which he was doing the murdering. So it was very clear before the invasion. He always said, you can surrender, and then we would not murder anybody. You just have to follow the law. And the law was very, very sort of clear, and it's basically enforcing a law of the land, so free trade, free practice of religion, and you have to pay taxes instead of to your king. You have to pay taxes to the Mongol Empire.
But did they really say we won't kill anyone?
Yes, 100%. That's they followed that, and this is very well documented.
Really?
Yes.
So everybody could have just laid down, and 10% of the world's population wouldn't be dead?
Yes.
Really?
So the nuance there is that sometimes they killed the upper classes.
Mm-hmm. Well, didn't they kill the royals by crushing them to death? They'd have lunch over them.
They were. Listen, this is a different time, but they were brutal.
Oh,
Because they want to, they use fear as part of the military tactics, right? So they want people to be terrified, and they want people to talk about how terrifying the Mongol Empire is, so that they forfeit more easily.
Yeah.
But, there's a lot of aspects of it. Not to say that Genghis Khan is a feminist, but there's a lot of progressive aspects. Like, he put a lot of women in positions of power. He gave a lot of rights to women. This is a very strange perspective.
Yeah, but he did a lot of raping.
Nope. There's not his kids.
What do you mean, nope? When he would conquer these places, he would take women.
Yeah, well,
and
that was
his new wives.
I thought that was
but
pretty
it wasn't
accepted.
their call. So that's kind of rapey.
That's very rapey, yeah. So, but there's
fucking very rapey, bro. What the fuck?
There's the kind of mass rape that the
Lex,
Soviet soldiers did at the end of World War II when they're marching towards Berlin, which is extremely violent, vicious, and sort of that kind of rape, which is part of the terror of war. And then there's creating a harem of women, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a different. I think the main point is that
yes, Lex.
This is something you talk about, that a large percent of the population, as that one study from 20 years ago found, are descendants of Genghis Khan.
Huge. Yeah.
I think the way to do that is to make everybody who's your descendant popular within the culture. Like, you can't have that many have your DNA propagate throughout civilization by raping. You have to have everybody who, to have a high status for people that are associated with Genghis Khan. So you can't have that kind of thing with fear.
Oh,
You can only do it with respect and high status. And he, for several generations, created an empire that was flourishing.
Okay, you're kind of whitewashing that.
No, well,
I mean, they killed 1 million people in Jin, China, and turned their bones into a stack, a
Yes.
pile that they recognized as snow-covered mountains from the distance. That's what they thought it was until they got up on it. When the Shah of Charisma came there to check it out, he's like, where is everybody? They had abandoned the roads because there were so many dead bodies that the roads had deteriorated into muck.
yeah. Let me actually sort of backtrack a little bit here because I'm uncomfortable because I'm deeply involved in the military affairs of modern day, and so there's a kind of, I was just kind of having fun. Yes, there was mass murder that was happening. It was vicious, and we could.
I haven't
and I'm
seen
not a
this
scholar
side
of
of
Genghis
Lex.
Khan. I was simply saying that it's interesting how history looks at these different empires. For example, we venerate the Roman Empire. Not we, but ancient Greece. And they were equally, if not more, brutal in their conquests and their destruction. And
Yeah,
so
I mean, there's never really been a time where there was a leading superpower that wasn't brutal.
It's I think, become less and less brutal over time. And people document this. So war, the number of people as percent of the population killed is less and less.
But what
There's more
about
laws?
Ukraine and Russia? Like, how many people have died all told between the two? It's got to be close to 1 million.
It's over 1 million casualties, which includes death and
That's a good
injuries.
point, Jay.
And the estimates vary, but I think a good estimate is over 400,000 total, maybe over
On both
500,000 on both sides. And the dead on the Ukraine side is probably 1/3 or 1/4 of the total dead.
Really? So
Much more on the
3/4 of them on the Russian side.
On the Russian
really?
side, yeah.
What do you attribute that to?
What the hell?
I think there's military scholars that
I did not
understand
know
this really
that.
well. I think, in general, the invading force loses more people than the defending force. That's one aspect. Of course, the Ukrainian military will say it's about the effectiveness of the Ukrainian military. And also, one of the other things they say is that the medical capabilities, so the medics are really strong on the Ukrainian side, which is also tragic because you're able to save lives, but you have the injuries, the pain of war, that the veterans have to go through.
Right.
So they're able to
It's
save
getting
lives
more
more effectively
depressing.
also. But,
Right.
But there is a big characteristic of the invading force usually loses more people.
What was it like going over there and interviewing Zelensky?
So I should say I went to Ukraine twice after February 24th, 2022 invasion. And maybe it's good for me to also say where I come from because it's surreal to be there for me.
Sure.
Both my parents are from Ukraine, from Kiev and Kharkiv. These are towns in Ukraine, cities in Ukraine. I've been there many times. I myself was born in Tajikistan, speaking of Genghis Khan. And I lived there in Tajikistan. And by the way, I'm regretting defending Genghis Khan in this conversation for fun.
You didn't really defend it.
Yeah, I want to be sort of say that over and over again. War is hell. And I'm almost at tension between how much Roman Empire, Caesar, and these folks are venerated, and Genghis Khan is seen as this barbarian that was just destroying and raping and so on. They were all horrible, vicious warmongers.
All of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, Tajikistan, and I lived for a time in Kiev, and I lived for a time
That's
in
an
Moscow.
interesting point.
I have family in Ukraine. I have family in Russia, and so, and I should say, in World War II, a lot of my family was slaughtered in Babi Yar, which is a ravine in Kiev, where they gather people around the Nazis, and they just put them in this ravine, and just shot them, and then put another layer of humans, told them to get naked and face down, lay face down, and slaughtered like this. It's mass graves, mass slaughter. And my grandfather fought the Nazis. He's a machine gunner, which he's one of the few that survives, which is the reason I'm here. That they basically tried to hold off the Nazi armada. And that the surreal aspect of all of this is the same land. You know, I just still remember the song 22 июня ровно в 4 часа Киев бомбили, нам объявили, что началась война. It's 22nd of June. The bombing at 4 a.m. the bombing of Kiev began. So this is in 1941, June 22nd. Just imagine, speaking of Genghis Khan, complete surprise, just the Nazi armada, just coming, the Operation Barbarossa, this massive military force invading your land. It's Kiev, and there's the biggest battles of all time were in this land. The Battle of Kiev, the Battle of Stalingrad, the Battle of Moscow. We're talking about hundreds of thousands, millions of people just slaughtering each other. And the way Hitler, of course, approached the battle, and so did Stalin, is nobody surrenders. It's all in. Slaughter. It doesn't matter if it's winter. It doesn't matter if there's no guns. It doesn't matter. It's just victory or death.
I can't imagine that,
on both sides. And so it's just brutal war. And so this is the land, right? This is, and I have, for a lot of people in this land, this history is part of them. It's part of their blood. They remember these struggles. They remember this political, this geopolitical, this military, this social. This is real. This is like, imagine it's recent. Imagine the United States living maybe a few decades after the Civil War. You remember you remember you have relatives that died. You remember the real hatred, the real tensions, the real battle. So, yeah, it was surreal to be back there, and to try to do what I was doing, which is to push for peace. Since there's probably a lot to say about this war, I should say that I interviewed Volodymyr Zelensky, and I will be traveling to Russia to interview Vladimir Putin. And
bang, baby.
I'm aware of the risks. I accept the risks. And the goal, the mission, is to just push for peace, to do my small part in pushing for peace. And that's what I was trying to do in this conversation. And it required just a huge amount of preparation. For people who don't know, maybe I'll lay out where there was opportunities for peace. So since the beginning of the war, February 24th, 2022, I think there was 3 moments to make peace. From the perspective of Ukraine, you want to make peace from strength. So when you're in a position of strength. The first time to make peace was March and April of 2022, when the Ukrainian forces were able to successfully defend the north, defend Kiev. There was this huge optimism, this belief that we could push back this gigantic Russian military. That's a place for leverage and the confidence both of the U.S. funding, the European militaries, and the Ukrainian military that we can win this. This is when you make peace, when there is a perception and a reality of strength. The second time was in the fall of 2022, when there was a successful counteroffensive by the Ukrainian forces that recaptured Kharkiv and Kherson. This is the south and the east of Ukraine. And there was this real sense that that the Ukrainian forces can defeat the Russian forces. Huge optimism. A lot of pressure from the U.S. to make peace then. This is the strength and perhaps the weakness of Volodymyr Zelensky, who I do think is a historic figure and a great leader, is that he, one, deeply emotionally feels the suffering of the people and the loss that war creates, and he single-handedly has to unite the nation and carry the will of a people and the morale of a people, has to lift the morale of a people. And that kind of man struggles to make peace because he wants justice, not peace. And so from a position of strength there, he wants to go further, recapture all of the land that he sees belongs to Ukraine. But that's exactly when you make peace. And so his very strength, a man that stayed in Kiev, that said, fuck you. We're going to win this. That kind of man that lifted a whole nation, that united a whole nation, that man is also struggled to make peace. And so the third time to make peace.
It's getting deep.
After all of that, the Russian military regrouped and has been capturing land gradually. And so the third time to make peace is now. The Trump administration, there's a momentum. They want to make peace. He's a great deal maker. He wants to end wars in all parts of the world.
He's made the deal in Gaza now.
Made the deal in Gaza, and that's a super complicated situation too, because they made a ceasefire deal with the hostages, but isn't it amazing that the Biden administration had 2 years, couldn't get anything done, and Trump gets it done in a day. He was saying that he was going to be able to do that, and everybody dismissed it. Yeah, and I think there's a political battle now taking credit for who made the ceasefire, which I think is silly.
Of course you're going to have that.
Yeah.
Biden is the president. He's still the president for another few days.
The point is, with Donald Trump, there's a real will and a momentum to make peace. There's a respect, there's a fear, there's, whatever you think about Donald Trump, he is this person that world leaders respect in the full meaning of the word respect. Not like admire, but fear. I think both Zelensky and Putin fear Donald Trump. And that's a great person to then make peace because he has the lever. All of them believe, Putin and Zelensky, that Trump can do some crazy shit.
And he probably would, but he doesn't want to.
Right,
this
he doesn't
is
want
the
to.
difference.
And
that's the very unique position that he's in, where they're afraid of him, but yet he wants peace.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so this is the time. And if you don't make peace now, what's going to happen is the funding from U.S. and the support from U.S. is going to dwindle gradually. And Putin is willing and able to just wait and to let the war continue for months and for years. And meanwhile, people are dying every single day.
Yeah.
Thousands of people. And
what's so horrible about this war, too, is there's GoPro footage.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cell phone footage. There's a lot of GoPro footage. I've watched too much of it, unfortunately. But it's rough, man. It's a horrible war. And it's a war that's so confusing over here, for especially to the uninitiated. For the people that are just like kind of reading the newspaper and getting a sort of a cursory understanding of what happened. Russia invaded. Why? What'd they do? And then you got to get into the whole U.S.-backed coup in 2014, and then you have to think about NATO and the agreement that was made, the fall of.
I reckon this is looking pretty good.
When the wall came down in Berlin, the agreement that NATO would not push forth and move closer to Russia, which they violated over and over and over again. The whole thing is so complicated that it takes forever just to sort of get an understanding of the pieces that are involved. Forget about like who's responsible for what, but just like how many different things are happening, simultaneously that are forcing Putin's hand, now Zelensky's hand, and it's just to be on this side of the world watching it take place, it's almost unbelievable. It's so hard to believe that Russia and Ukraine, which were both a part of the Soviet Union just not that long ago, while during my lifetime, now they're at war.
And I should say that I believe, so how do you handle situations like this? I believe U.S. actually gave not enough money to Ukraine. They should have given more money, hit really hard, and then make peace. This is the point a month or two after the start of the war, you can learn the same kind of lesson with Iraq and Afghanistan. That there's no reason those invasions, those military operations.
There's no other way. There's no other way than just give money and hit hard. There's no other way. What about
avoid it?
Yeah. What about have NATO back out?
Well, a lot of this is about diplomatic rhetoric, and yes, NATO was consistently talking shit to Putin, and that's not like a lot of this is about diplomacy,
right?
And you can't just pressure with words. I mean,
sorry, I was just gonna chat to my family for a second. It'll just be a couple of minutes.
For some people, it's like. It seems almost silly that you need to show respect to world leaders, but there needs to be shown real respect. Putin has laid out the interest of the Russian Federation. He said he's been very clear about what the interests are. They want their security to be respected. They want their nation to be respected. He's very clear, and simply at the negotiation table, he just needs to be respected. Like, his perspective needs to be understood and heard. You can't just say Putin is evil, bad guy, authoritarian, hates freedom. We need to destroy him. This whole vibe and energy this idealistic sense that you bring to the table. You have to respect leaders. You have to respect Xi Jinping. You have to respect Putin when you're at the negotiation table. Not when you're on Twitter and X or talking shit, or historians or activists. Fine, you can criticize as much as you want, as vicious as you want. You can mock. Artists can mock as much as they want. Comedians, doesn't matter. When you're a world leader and you come to the table, you have to show respect. You have to treat other world leaders, as funny as it is to say, the way you want to be treated, with respect.
It's not funny at all. Yeah, it makes sense.
And if
you want to get things done.
If you want to get things done, and more importantly, if you want in this war for the death to end, one of the things I kept pushing in an almost childlike way with Zelensky is getting him to open himself up for peace, because he kept shutting it down. He kept mocking Putin. He kept criticizing Putin, which is okay. It's okay to sort of criticize and say that there's war crimes, that there's real vicious violence and destruction happening. But along that, there has to be a door open of respect, of I'm willing to come to the table to negotiate and respect the other nation's interests, as opposed to saying I'm only going to talk to the United States. You have to be open to negotiate, because unfortunately, this is the motherfucker of peace. Is you have to compromise. You have to sit across the table as a world leader with a person you might fucking hate, because unlike Putin, I should say, Zelensky goes to the front. He talks to the soldiers. He sees the dead bodies. He talks to the civilians, the mothers that lost their children, the wives that lost their husband, right? This person who's an empath, who's an emotional being, he's wearing all that in his mind. Like, there's a real pain there. Like, he's tormented by this. If you're a leader, you have to put all that aside, and you have to sit and save your nation by compromising. That's it. And that's the hard thing of it, especially now there's an opportunity where the Trump figure rolls in who wants to make peace. You have to use this opportunity.
Yeah.
And it's tough. It's very, very tough.
Yeah. You're putting it mildly. Very tough. What do you think Trump can do now? When he gets what could possibly, if Zelensky wants victory, they want revenge, what can Trump do to sort of like bring peace to the table?
I think some of these notions sound naive, but literally meet, which they haven't been meeting. So meet with Putin, meet with Zelensky.
They haven't been meeting at all?
No. But so Zelensky comes down. They've been meeting with Zelensky, but there is no meeting with Putin. I think the right thing to do is to go to whether it's Switzerland or Turkey, Istanbul, or Minsk, and like the biggest thing for me would be literally the three of them sit together. I think I trust in Trump's negotiation ability, and the carrot and the stick of the United States military and the United States economy for being able to control oil prices, being able to control trade with tariffs, being able to threaten military force and funding and so on, plus sanctions, all of this. You can roll in with that carrot and stick, implied or made implicit or explicit, and just sit at the table and talk like human beings and show each other respect. Like that, is one of the things that actually COVID did. There's something that happens where remote communication just is not it. Like the silly thing about this podcast being in person, right? There's a real power there. Everything else is, fucking with a condom.
Did I turn off my headset?
You have to show up. It's part of the reason.
It's more like jerking off with a condom on.
So I just helping out my family.
Fucking with a condom on.
For the metaphor, yeah.
How have I come back to
part of
them
the reason
talking about
to talk
sex
to
again?
President Zelensky in Russian, which I speak fluently.
Like, come on,
and
guys.
he speaks fluently. It's his primary language. For people who seem to misunderstand this on the internet, he spoke Russian his whole life. That's his main language. He speaks it with his wife, with his whole staff, with all of this. This is his language. It's just that now the Ukrainian language has become a symbol of independence. So they're fighting for their independence, for their sovereignty. I understand it, but,
So he spoke with you in Ukrainian?
He kept going back and forth. But yeah, most of the powerful things were said in Ukrainian. So I'm listening to an interpreter through a shitty headset. The interpreter's not, forgive me to the interpreter, but it's not very good. He's delayed. There's noise.
God, but wouldn't it make more sense if he spoke to you in a language that you understand?
Yeah, we really tried. But this is a man, once again.
Yeah.
He's the leader of a nation in a time of war, and he's not stylistically who he is. Like
Damn, Lex.
This is like a Braveheart type character.
Playoffs. We're talking about playoffs? You bet we are. Get in on the action with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Scoring touchdowns is key to winning the playoffs, and you can score big by betting on them at DraftKings, the #1 place to bet touchdowns.
Come on, Jay, baby.
Ready to place your bet? Try betting on something simple like a
Why are
player to
you
score
promoting
6.
gambling,
Go
buddy?
to Info. As he started his career. ANG.
Right. I mean, you never know who the leaders are that step up. I think, a lot of people sort of say that it's trivial that he stayed in Kiev when the Russian military invaded. To me, it's not trivial at all. I think that's a truly heroic act to stay when nobody knows what's going to happen and all the experts are saying Kiev is going to be taken. To stay as a leader in that same place where you were the night before, like working, and not flee when the CIA, everybody's telling you to flee. To stay there like a bad motherfucker and actually go outside and film yourself speaking to the nation that we're going to win this. We're going to hold strong. That's an insane thing to do. And maybe it does require, it's a Trump level insanity, right? It's similar to me to the Trump standing up when there's still bullets flying and saying fight, 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 right? Where does that come from? I don't know, but most people don't have that.
Right.
And it's nice it was refreshing. It was refreshing when you see that. Holy fuck, yes, we want that guy.
Yeah.
And he really united a nation. The nation was fractured. He was actually not popular at all up to that war because the policies he was trying were not working.
What policy specifically?
So so there's stuff that was working. I don't know the internals of the Ukrainian politics that well, but so he won in 2019 based on his desire to fight corruption and to modernize Ukrainian digital system, which he did very successfully. It's actually super interesting. You can they have an app called Dia, which your passport, all your identifications, all appified. Which I don't understand why the United States doesn't have that. You can update your license. You can get your license instantly. So it's like the 21st century version of what government should work like. The reason they did that is it's a way to fight corruption. It's a way, like, whenever you have paperwork, there's a place for corruption to seep in. So he was very serious about fighting corruption. And that's the other thing is there is corruption in Ukraine. There's not as much as people perceive. But it's a serious problem. Especially
is it less now than before?
Well, I see. I want to be careful here because I don't like. It's very difficult to know the perception. There's a serious concern about corruption. In a time of war, there's always going to be more corruption. The United States spent $9 trillion on the war in Afghanistan, Iraq, and the Middle East. After 9/11, on that part of the world, they spent $9 trillion, and it's growing. Using all that money, you've had a lot of guests on this program talking about how that money was used. There's a lot of shady shit that happened.
Oh, yeah.
War breeds corruption. This is one of the reasons you should be concerned about the military-industrial complex is because that money is just not used well.
Right.
But that's all. That's a discussion. The reality of corruption in Ukraine is it should be dealt with after you make peace. All the problems, the elections were suspended too. The ideas of democracy. There is censorship in Ukraine now. All of those ideas all of those things cannot be fixed until the war is ended. The reason there is censorship now in Ukraine is because it's a war. Like you can't. The ideas of democracy, in part, have to be suspended during a war to effectively fight that war. This is the whole idea of martial law. The United States has this. You don't fuck around. You have to win the war. When your land is invaded, you have to. Everybody has to be focused on this. The problem is it's a slippery slope. When all the media channels are being controlled, and the president and everybody is so invested in quote unquote winning the war, then where are the critical voices that say we need peace? Right? They're coming from the outside, but you need that. The thing is, it's a really complicated tension, right? You don't during the war with martial law, you do want to suspend elections potentially. It's a really difficult trade-off. The United States has the same thing. If we were to be invaded, I don't know by who. This is not, if Canada invaded.
Thanks for the cheap viewers. Shout out.
This, but there's going to be a more, yeah.
But a quick fight.
I'll build my calm with the real people.
Like there would be a martial law, where elections would be delayed or suspended and so on. So all those criticisms, all those concerns, can only be dealt with once you make peace.
Yeah.
And in terms of corruption, there's a lot of people that know Zelensky well, and this has been my impression, having met him. I don't think and I've not heard anybody that knows him well say that he's personally corrupt. And this is really important. Like, he himself is not personally corrupt.
We've done some good work, guys.
He legitimately is fighting corruption. Now, he's in a system that has corruption. Russia has corruption. It's really difficult to weed out corruption. But he legitimately, at least to me, that's really important, that he, as a single human being, and the people really close around him, like really close. Corruption starts to seep in, of course, when you go further out. But in that direct human being, that he is not personally corrupt. He, like financially speaking, he singularly believes in the idea of Ukraine as a sovereign nation, and he's willing to die for that idea. That is his strength, and that is also his weakness when it's time to make peace.
When you are preparing to do something like this, and you are, you're doing your research, you're getting ready to go do it, what are your concerns, other than your own physical safety, of course? But like, what is your, like, ultimately, what's your concerns? What are your goals when you're setting out to do this? Because this is very different than any other kind of podcast interview. There's no other format really where a world leader in the middle of a huge international conflict is going to sit down for 3 hours and talk to an American scientist, which is weird too, right? It's like, why are you doing it? You know what I mean? Like, why this guy who works in AI just decides he's going to start a podcast. The podcast becomes very successful, and all of a sudden he's like, I'd like to talk to everybody. I'd like to go over and talk to Zelensky and talk to Putin, and everybody's like, why you? What the fuck are you doing? So you get a lot of that.
Yeah.
And then unfortunately for you, you read the comments, so you get sucked into all that negativity.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to say there. First of all, on the comments side, I always have a little Joe Rogan on my shoulder saying, don't read the comments.
Don't read the comments.
And in this situation, it's especially intense.
Yeah.
I should say, like, privately, after I did the conversation with Zelensky, every single person that knows the situation well, knows me personally, has written to me, and it's all been really positive. Like, really positive. Almost like in the desert wanting water positive. Because there's a lot of voices that are afraid to speak that want peace.
Sure.
But online, this is something we talked about offline a little bit, there's just like these like swarms of people that are like,
not even necessarily people.
that's I don't want to sort of go too far in that territory, assuming that anybody who criticized me is a bot.
No.
but there is
I'm not saying that, but there's an enormous element of that's real. Whether it's bots or whether it's hired people, paid propagandists, the conversation is not a pure conversation between people expressing their ideas. There's a lot of propaganda online, and it's very confusing to try to discern what the percentage is. You know, we've talked about this a bunch of times on the podcast, but there was a former
turn the
FBI
aircon
analyst
on a
who
bit in
estimated
my room.
it's on Twitter alone. This is before the purchase. He believed it was around 80%. So 80% fake accounts. 80% not just propaganda, like government propaganda, but most certainly corporations are hiring people to do similar things. I'm sure there's companies that will do that for public figures, actors, you know, people that are involved in conflict. Yeah, this is part of the Blake Lively
It's getting
dispute,
hot up in
is
this
that
bitch.
she's accusing that Justin Baldoni actor of an organized attack on her, which is probably what it feels like anyway when you're involved in something on social media. Like, oh my God, this is organized, or they're attacking you. But it's a very confusing landscape. And ideally, what we would want with social media is different people, informed and uninformed, but at least expressing their ideas on things and exchanging information back and forth and talking. It's not the whole story, though. There's a lot of other players involved that are not real. There's AI for sure. There's definitely large language models that are involved in
We're so
this
close chart
back
to
and
being
forth with,
getting onto the
you know,
3D model
automation.
side of this.
You know, they look out for certain code words, and these accounts attack certain ideas. So it's hard to know like what the actual will of the people is.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely true. And I've seen a lot of evidence of this, that there's Ukrainian bot farms and Russian bot farms.
Have you spoke to Elon about this?
About bot farms?
Yeah, because like he knows a lot more now, of course, right? Because there was the big concern when he was buying Twitter. They were trying to say that it was 5%. It was only 5% bots. And they were doing that on an extremely low sample size. They were doing it off of 100 people. So they got 100 people. And out of those 100 people, 5 of them they determined were bots, and so they went with 5%, which is just ridiculous. You know, you're dealing with how many people are on Twitter every day? Like, what's the total Twitter audience? It's not as big as Facebook, right? Facebook is 3.2 billion worldwide, which is unbelievable.
I think X has a smaller number, but very influential and very active, yeah.
Very active, very influential. 245 daily active. What is the total amount of accounts on it, though? Because, you know, there's daily active, and then there's just people that just read them. There's a lot of people that just read. 541.56 million monthly active users. So, again, that's active users. So, total users. What's the total users? See, it's all active. I want to know it counts.
That's the only. I don't. They delete counts all the time.
Right. Yeah, they definitely do. So they must have some sort of a system where they weed out bots. And, there's a lot of concern right now on Twitter about censorship. I try to stay out of Twitter as much as I can, honestly, because I think it's bad for your mental health. I really do. I think people just barking at each other all day is not good to absorb. I want to absorb real people that I interact with. I try to pay attention to the news. I try to pay attention to whatever controversial ideas are out there and try to see what I think. But I don't think it's good to dive in to social media all day. I think it's uniquely bad.
Good work, Jay.
And I think so many people are involved in it, and they don't realize that they're poisoning their brain, just like they would poison their body if they were eating junk food all day. I think it's genuinely bad for you.
Yeah, I mean, and you and I are, and also in a particular, doing a podcast, and we're also very different human beings. I would say your psychological fortitude is pretty strong. Like, and I wear my heart on my sleeve maybe a little bit more, and if I shit gets to me, and when you try to put compassion out there in the world in the way I did, especially with this conversation with Zelensky, the attacks,
you just have to recognize who the kind of people that are doing that are.
Yeah.
Those are just really weak people, really weak, psychologically damaged, mentally ill people that are probably medicated.
I sort of, to push back, I think some of them are actually good, sophisticated people. In the way I did, especially with this conversation with Zelensky, the attacks,
you just have to recognize who the kind of people that are doing that are.
Yeah.
Those are just really weak people, really weak, psychologically damaged, mentally ill people that are probably medicated.
I sort of, to push back, I think some of them are actually good, sophisticated people. They're just acting not their best selves. I've seen this. There's people that are I know them personally, and online they just the worst shit comes out of them.
Yeah. Because they're mentally ill.
But then all of us are a bit mentally ill. Right?
Yeah, well, we're all a little mentally ill.
Yeah.
No one is enlightened that I've met.
Yeah,
I've never met one person who's perfect, right? I don't think it's possible with this journey that we're on as these meat vehicles, these soul-carrying meat vehicles navigating a very confusing world. I don't think it's possible to be perfect. But you can have a desire to be a good person, and some people don't have that. And the excuse that they always use is, this is the Donald Trump excuse. You do anything you can to stop Hitler, right? And this is why they want to conflate, and they always want to pretend that everyone's Hitler. The problem with that is it just, after a while, it's crying wolf, and people are like, oh, this is a bullshit game you're playing, and you're just using it as an excuse. Elon's talked about this a lot, and he's absolutely correct, is that people use woke ideology as an excuse to be an asshole. And it's really just people that are assholes that are attaching themselves to things that make them feel righteous. And so they wrap themselves in this idea to give them virtue and to allow them to say the most awful things about other people that have different perspectives. And then just by nature, if you're doing that, you're doing the wrong thing. You're a bad person. You can justify it all you want. You can find people that agree with you all you want. But those people are on the right track, or the wrong track, rather. The people that are listening to you and agreeing with you, they're on the wrong track. They're the wrong track if we want to be collectively a kind, compassionate, cohesive society, a community of human beings that all live together.
14 pieces.
That's totally possible. If you can do it in small groups of people, you can do it in enormous groups of people. It just has to be an ethic that gets promoted.
See, imagine
it has
these
to be
glasses.
Something that you see people that you admire
this
adhere
hat,
to, and
this
you
jacket
do it as well.
with these kicks on.
Whenever someone goes outside of that, and
even
whenever someone starts making horrific, unfounded
Not
personal
everything will go
attacks
together,
because someone has a different political
but
ideology, or just going after them
can't
every day,
expect
all
that.
day long,
Want
you're
some
just
variety,
broken.
anyway.
You're on the wrong path, period. And intelligent, aware people that have control of their emotions recognize that, and they're not going to take your perspective seriously. So you're going to be less and less effective.
Set up these YouTube
with what
shorts
you do.
next time.
And in general, the failure mode is to paint the world, to draw a line between good and evil.
Yeah.
Whether it's a line in geography, Russians, Putin is evil, or if it's Trump, Trump is evil.
Right.
The version of that is Hitler. So I'm a big proponent of Solzhenitsyn's famous, the author of Gulag Archipelago, that the line between good and evil runs through the heart of every man. That all of us have that in us, and it is good to be humbled by that reality. And if you are humbled by that reality, then you're not going to see any other people as purely evil or purely good. All of that kind of thing is used to hate others.
Yeah. And even when it's unfounded. You know, even like I'm watching the Pete Hegseth, the confirmation hearings, and these ignorant people are going after his tattoo, not even knowing what the tattoo is, and trying to pretend that it's some sort of radical, hateful tattoo when it's just an ancient Christian tattoo. It's so strange. I mean, that tattoo's in churches. That's symbols in churches. That symbol's been around for a long fucking time. It's just a Christian tattoo. And I was watching the Piers Morgan show, and Piers Morgan had Michael Knowles and these two super whack, and Dave Rubin, and two super wacky leftist people that didn't know what the tattoo was, and they were criticizing it. And Piers Morgan kept having, "What is the tattoo? What is it? Tell me what it is." And the guy would go on, "You're not answering the question. Go back to it. What is it?" And well, let's look it up. He's like, no, don't look it up. I want you to tell me if you're saying it's offensive. And so then the woman chimes in, and Michael Knowles just clowns her, just absolutely knows the history of the tattoo, including, like, you know, she's talking about it before, it existed before Islam, you know, and she's criticizing what it is. And he's like, do you understand that Islam didn't exist when this tattoo, when this symbol existed? Like, it's not an anti-Muslim symbol, because there was no Muslims when this symbol was created. Like, this is bonkers. And they're all in, digging their heels in, pretending, just trying to win this conversation, just trying to win. And Piers Morgan's doing that. He's like the Jerry Springer of political ideology now. He just has people get on the show and yell at each other. It's very entertaining, and he gets great sound bites out of it. It's kind of genius in terms of like an engagement perspective. If you looked at your show as just like, how do I get more engagement? Well, that's how you do it. You get some wacky leftist going to say nutty things. You get some right-wing person that's going to say nutty things, and you get them all together yelling at each other.
I wish he did less of that. I should say that Piers Morgan, I think, is a great interviewer. Like, he's legit a great interviewer, but he also he can put on his Jerry Springer hat on, too.
He's making money. Listen, I mean...
He does both. He does do long-form, great interviews, so that's...
He's found his lane.
All right.
His lane is Jerry Springer. But he's doing a good job exposing these people. It's very valuable. Like, that conversation was very valuable for me, because I was like, this is adorable. Watching this guy, like, flounder around trying to come up with a reason why this tattoo is so offensive.
Yeah, but see, what I don't like about that is that guy's floundering, but there could be actually facets to that person outside of this ridiculousness that's interesting.
Right, so, but you got to cleanse that from your mind, son.
They do.
If you want to be the guy who's on television talking about important issues, and you've got this stupid thing in your head where you're arguing about a tattoo that you don't even understand, you got to cleanse that stupidity out of your fucking mind. Sometimes the best way to do that is to get clowned on television.
True.
So he got exposed. She got exposed. They both look like morons. And then Michael Knowles, who did a fantastic job of, like, smiling, never raising his voice, calmly explaining it. Have you seen it?
No, I haven't. That's hilarious.
See if you can find it, Jamie. It's pretty wonderful. Michael Knowles is a pro. Yeah. He's a pro. The way he handled it was remarkable. Yeah, I know people criticize that guy, but fucking people criticize everybody. I'm just saying, in this moment...
Don't read the comments, Joe.
Yeah, don't read the comments. Yeah. Yeah, even about other people, right?
Well, that's the thing. I think you said that you sometimes read comments from friends of yours. Like,
yeah, I don't even like doing that. I try not to do that too.
This is the thing that bothers me about comments is I don't read them, but like I don't know, my mom will read them and she'll text me something like, "Don't listen to what people say. It's okay."
My mom will send me things. Is this true? I'm like, Mom, come on.
This is the clip?
Yeah, this
Okay,
is it. This is wonderful. Watch this. The two people on the far right of the screen, the lady in the pink jacket and the dude with the beard, they're fucked. They got cooked.
You could accuse Pete of is being too alert and energetic. I found it overwhelming, actually, while I was there, tired, trying to dust the sand out of my eyes. But you suggest that the graduate of Princeton and Harvard, who for decades has been in the U.S. military, served his country honorably, that he's somehow unqualified to work at the Pentagon. The most egregious accusation you make against him, though, is that he's an extremist because he has a tattoo. Could you tell us what the tattoo is?
The tattoos specifically, I did not make the allegation that he's an extremist. It was actually
you
his
repeated the
fellow
allegation.
colleague
So what's
who
the
called
tattoo?
him as an insider threat.
Yeah, right. So what's the tattoo?
Me.
I can tell you. It says
It was his fellow
No,
colleague.
let Wajahat answer because Wajahat raised the tattoo. Wajahat, it's a fair question. What is this tattoo that you're so upset about? Hang on, Wajahat,
wait. Two things.
Wajahat, hang on. Simple question. What is this tattoo that you're so upset about?
I wasn't the one upset about it. I was talking about his fellow colleague. This is exactly what I said. His fellow colleague.
Do you know what it was?
In the U.S. Army, called him out as a potential insider threat.
What is the
tattoo?
tattoo?
The tattoos on his chest.
What is the tattoo?
And also, I called him an extremist based upon his own book. Read the book.
What
American
is the
Crusade,
tattoo?
His own words.
If you don't know what the tattoo is, just admit it.
Oh my lord! Listen,
Would you
what
like
is
to
it?
tell you what the tattoo is?
Wait.
No, I'm genuinely intrigued.
Let the lady talk.
This is so stupid.
When the lady talks, it's even more brutal.
This reminds me of like a
Genuinely
schoolyard
A woman hasn't spoken yet.
argument.
A woman hasn't spoken yet. Let her speak. A woman hasn't spoken yet.
Be honest with Jai.
I did hear him answer it, but they were all talking over each other.
Did I say the words?
Yeah, they weren't talking about the cross. They're talking about a different tattoo.
Yeah, well, she is talking about that as well.
Okay.
But it'll go on to that.
Actually know what that tattoo is or not?
Listen, what I do know is I read his book, and in his book, if you read it, called American Crusade, in his book, wait a second.
Be honest.
His book.
Be honest.
I am. Look.
This is Jerry Springer.
Yeah, literally.
Donald Trump.
But do you know the
putting
answer?
our national security at risk for Pete Hegseth. I'm telling you everything, and you guys are finding ways to spin. Why are you guys okay with a man who has an NDA with a woman that he allegedly sexually assaulted?
Do you know what the tattoo is that you got so upset about?
No, it goes further. See if you can find where the woman's speaking, because it gets even more brutal. Because she's incorrect, and Michael Knowles corrects her. And when he corrects her, it's fucking great.
It's a good way to expose.
See if you can find the other one, Jamie.
Very narrow.
Just like, show my point. I was so proud about my point.
Here, I gotta
Click on.
I missed the whole show. It's an hour-long show.
Well,
we're all talking the entire
click right
time.
there. I'll know where it is.
Jamie's like,
what is the answer?
This falls along a threat as an insider threat.
I'm going back to Michael now.
2021 pegged Pete Hegseth as a potential insider.
You had 98 chances to answer and you failed the test. Sorry. I'm going to Michael. I'm going to Michael. Don't talk over each other. Michael.
The tattoo in question is called a Jerusalem cross. That this is a medieval Christian symbol, goes back a long time. In fact, at Jimmy Carter's funeral, there was a Jerusalem cross on the floor of the cathedral, and on the program for the funeral, there's one other tattoo that some have suggested could be extremist. It's the phrase Deus Volt, which is a medieval Christian slogan, a long traditional slogan that refers to God's will, and it goes back a long way. These are very traditional, very mainstream Christian symbols that not only are not extreme in any way, but which even the people who want to accuse him of extremism couldn't possibly name. That is pathetic.
I'm probably going to call it
His insider guardsman did it, which is what I said, and also I said that he called himself too extreme for the U.S. military in his book. That's pathetic.
Okay.
So is Pete Hegseth lying that he's too extreme in his book?
Let me go to Julie. He's been waiting.
He's too extreme for radical leftists.
Let me go to Julie.
Is he lying?
Be gentlemanly, please. We have a lady who's not spoken. Julie, be waiting very patiently. Your view of this. I'll tell you what, before you answer, I know you said in your Substack about this, under normal circumstances, Pete Hegseth, would be precluded from serving in any leadership role. So explain why you said that.
Well, I will explain in 1 second. Let me go back to something that was said in the very beginning, that he spent more than 10 years at Fox News, and that's what qualifies him to be in this position that he wants to be in. I spent more than 10 years at